our meeting to order. And we are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to have Dan lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You're going to have what?
I am.
He's looking up the words.
I was pulling up over here. No. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Dan?
I got close, didn't I?
Oh, Dan.
That was close. I know the first time.
I think you got to start over, Dan.
All right, I think that was great. Okay, we are going to move on to presentation recognition. Brian.
Yes, I wish, like I said, I wish we could be in person, and we will when Dan comes by central office. We do have a going away present for him. I'd like to take this opportunity to just speak to Dan's service, and then if any board members want to chime in. Dan was an excellent board member, and he's going to be sorely missed. Dan had a lot of skills and gifts that he brought to the board. His ability to look at financial information and dissect that was really helpful to me during my 3 years as serving as superintendent. Dan did a lot of work behind the scenes on our earlier Prop B and the planning for the middle school and high school project. He served on our design team for that. I think Dan also served an important role on the board. He would always appropriately challenge us, and sometimes our ways of thinking and his voice, I think, really rounded out the board. And I think that's really an important piece that frankly we may be missing to some extent. So Dan is going to be missed. He did an amazing job. So I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to add to that.
Yeah, Dan, I appreciate the time. I mean, you're not that great with the Pledge of Allegiance, I got to admit. It's
at least 80%. Come on.
It's a little awkward. No, seriously, Dan, I echo what Brian said. It was a big 3-year period that you were involved. I mean, really big changes for the district, putting us in a really good direction, and a lot of hard work. I know personally a lot of time and effort, and Dan, really appreciate it. I think the biggest thing for me is you really pushing us to look at it and bringing that perspective. So Dan, really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
So one of the things that I'd like to highlight is, I mean, in the past 3 years, new superintendent, we've got a bond for the high school, middle school, and now we've got a bond for the elementary schools. In terms of like facelift for a district, this is probably the ultimate 3 years that you could actually have. You're not going to see something like this in the next 50. So where we're at is a testament to, I think, the entire board and to Dan making sure that, he kept us in line and focused on the most important thing, which is obviously the kids and the community going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. What's been, guys? It's been.
won't.
Go ahead.
I won't try to repeat everything you said, but I would echo it, and I just want to say thanks, and hope you're not a complete stranger going forward. Feel free to come in and let us know what we're doing wrong or what those other people are doing wrong, at least.
I'm gonna come back.
Anyway, yeah, thanks a bunch, Dan.
Yeah, I will echo that as well. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I did enjoy when we were going through this last facilities process, the conversations that you and I had at coffee shops thinking about the best solution for the district moving forward. Those were the highlights of working with you on the board, were the parts that were outside of our board meetings, where we just had some good conversations, hard conversations about directions for this district to go. So I really appreciated that, and all of your thoughts and heart that went into being a board member. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Evan. I appreciate it. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, as you guys all know. It's an honor, of course, to be an elected official and to work for especially for the school district and the kids. And it's been a pleasure. It's been, as you guys probably all know, it's a job you always wish you could put more time and effort into, because it's so deserving and needing. But it's been great. It's been a fantastic experience. You guys have all been great to work with. We've had such great meetings and dialogue, and as a team, what a great district to work for too on a school board. We've talked about that plenty of times. It's been really, really good. A great community to work for, and I've enjoyed all my time with you guys too. All the conversations, all the time on the board, and so it's hard to walk away from. But obviously, the board's in good hands. You guys have a lot going for you, and a lot of great people on the board. So I've no problems with that. I think I'll miss you guys a lot, and it was a lot of fun. So good luck.
Thank you, Dan. I ditto everything everyone said. I'm not good at goodbyes.
We'll be at the snow cone stop plenty, Gary. Chris, I'll give you some quick advice. A lot of the board turned over in a short period of time, and we fumbled around a lot with how hard to push each other. My advice is just don't hold back. You got questions, ask them, challenge people. Ask Brian hard questions, ask the presenters hard questions. If they seem like dumb questions, ask them, get them all out. There's really no rule book on how hard to push or what kind of questions to ask. The only way to do it is just to jump in there. And so don't be shy.
Thanks, Dan.
Lindsay.
Dan, I did it with a hug, but we just can't do it, man.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. We are going to move over to citizens' comments, and now that we're doing our Google Meet meetings, citizens have the opportunity to submit their comments via email, and I believe we do have somebody who submitted a comment this evening.
Okay. Dear Brentwood School Board, I am a homeschooling mother who took my son out of public education from Mark Twain Elementary School in December of 2018. At that time, I asked the Brentwood superintendent to participate in after-school activities and clubs, as my tax dollars still pay for local education. He would not allow this, despite homeschoolers in other parts of the state being allowed to participate in their local district extracurricular activities. I contact you to request that this again be brought to the table. I do not think it is fair for me to continuously pay Brentwood taxes and my homeschooled son be denied participation in all local extracurricular school activities. Please let me know how we can finally welcome Brentwood homeschoolers into the public school community in a way that works for traditional, pre-pandemic, homeschooling families. Thank you for your time and attending to this important matter. And it's Dr. Danielle Davis.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Davis, for those comments. The way that public comments work with the school board meetings, we can respond to those or have someone from the district respond to that comment in the future, and not for discussion tonight, but we appreciate your comment. Okay, and let's move on to roll call, please, Kate.
Okay. Jamie Allen.
Here.
Dan Brule.
Here.
Melissa Naird.
Here.
Keith Ravenberg.
Here.
Lindsay Spencer.
Here.
Carrie Trostel.
Here.
Mark Wilmer.
Here.
Okay, and so that moves us on to the reorganization of the board, where I will ask for a motion to accept our 3 new school board members, or 1 new school board member, and Keith and I. So a motion to accept Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Ravenberg as members of the Board of Education.
I move that we accept Mr. Perkins, Ms. Spencer, and Mr. Ravenberg as members of the Board of Education.
And I'll need a second to that.
A second. I thought I did, but I might have been muted.
Okay.
Come on, Melissa, I need you.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Jamie. It won't happen again.
All right. Any discussion with this motion? Great. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes. So we need the secretary of the board to administer the oath of office to our new elected board directors.
Is it me or am I gone?
No, you're
it's
not
you.
on yet.
Oh, so close.
We haven't adjourned yet, Dan.
It's another oath.
I have this one though.
And we'll start with, we'll have Mr. Chris Perkins give the oath, take the oath of director first.
Is it one at a time? Do I have to give it 3 times?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, you ready, Chris? I'm going to pause intentionally so that you can repeat what I say, okay?
All right.
I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution in the State of Missouri,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of school director
discharge the duty of school director
in and for Brentwood School District,
in and for Brentwood School District,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
to the best of my ability according to law, so help me God.
to the best of my ability according to law, so help me God.
Great. Welcome to the board, Chris.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Chris.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
And I am next, please, Dan.
Okay, ready?
I am ready.
You remember that? I have to say it again.
Go.
Don't worry, she'll be 90% correct. That'll be your 80%.
I got this.
Okay. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
the duties of school director
the duties of school director
in and for Brentwood School District,
in and for Brentwood School District,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
according to law, so help me God.
according to law, so help me God. Thank you.
Great. Welcome back.
Thank you. All right. And then Keith.
Okay, Keith. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. He probably knows this one by heart already. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
the duties of school director
the duties of school director
in and for Brentwood School District,
in and for Brentwood School District,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
St. Louis County, Missouri,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
according to law, so help me God.
according to law, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a boy.
Your parting words, Dan.
That will be remembered. Mhm. All right. So So then the old board is adjourned and the superintendent calls a new board to order. It's our next step.
All right, welcome new school board. So we are officially called to order. We can say goodbye to our friend Dan. Not for long, hopefully.
Okay, boys, guys, and girls, enjoy the evening.
Thanks so much.
Take care,
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks,
Take care,
Dan.
Dan. Appreciate it.
So yeah.
Now at this point, I would like to call for any nominations for president of the school board.
I nominate Lindsay Spencer for president.
Did I hear? Okay, and we have a second on that. Now, before we move to discussion, do we have any additional nominations for president?
Nope.
Hearing none. Any discussion before we vote on Lindsay Spencer as president?
Here's to a less exciting year than your last term. Please, Jesus.
Next year. There's a lot going on though. But I'm happy. Yeah.
Baptism by fire. She did a great job.
Yeah, Lindsay,
Yes, she did.
excellent job coming off that year.
Thank you.
All in favor of Lindsay as president, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Hearing so, passes 7-0. Lindsay Spencer is our board president. Congratulations, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to call, do we have any nominations for vice president?
I nominate Jamie Allen for vice president.
Second.
Do we have any other nominations for vice president? Hearing none, any discussion? All in favor of Jamie Allen for vice president of the school board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Passes 7-0. Jamie Allen is our board vice president. Congratulations, Jamie. Next up, let's go ahead and do treasurer. Do we have a nomination to be the board treasurer at this point? Oh, I'm sorry. I took your job, Lindsay. You're supposed to take over now.
President's job, Dr. Lane.
Really great.
Sorry.
We have 5 minutes once a year where you get to be in charge.
And then I abused it and tried to get 6 minutes.
That's probably a felony.
All right. And the power is good, huh, Brian?
Lindsay, you're gonna have to rip it back from him. Do not let him have that.
All right. So yes, as Brian mentioned, we are going to move on to the nominations for treasurer. So there are nominations for treasurer.
I nominate Mark Wilmer for treasurer.
Do we have a second, Melissa?
Second, yeah.
Great. Any other nominees for treasurer at this point? Okay, discussion. All right, so all in favor for Mark Wilmer for treasurer, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, that passes 7-0. Mark, thank you for being the treasurer again. Okay, and then we're going to move on to the election for secretary. Do we have nominations for the secretary?
I nominate Melissa Nair for secretary.
And a second?
Can I
Second.
second myself?
Second.
Sure.
But thank you for being so enthusiastic.
I tried to second that.
We got it. All right, so we
They
have
got it.
nominations for secretary. All right, discussion? All those in favor of Melissa Nert being our secretary, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, that passes 1-0. Melissa Nert, thank you for being our secretary this year. All right, and then we also need to select our delegates and alternate for the MSBA and also SSD for special school districts. Let's start with MSBA. Do we have anyone that would like to be our delegate for MSBA this year? Keith?
I continue to be willing to do that. So I guess I didn't really directly answer your question. No, I'd be happy to do that. Somebody else needs to do it someday, though.
That's great. Well, so Chris, we have a delegate for the Missouri School Board Association, and so Keith for a while has been able to do that and kept up with legislation and things that are happening at the state level for our school board. Do we have anyone else that is interested in being our delegate for the MSBA?
I would be more than happy to serve as his alternate, and I will try and step up a little more this year and see what I can do to learn from Keith.
Okay.
Well, now that you've been fully trained finally, Jamie, I think you qualify.
Keith, it's a multi-year training process. You know that by now.
So, Brian, do we need to vote on the MSBA delegate or no? Okay, so we'll stick with Keith as our delegate and Jamie as the alternate. We also have a delegate for our special school district. This year, Melissa served as our delegate, and is anyone interested in doing that this coming year?
I'm happy to do it again unless somebody wants to. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and so and it's not a big time commitment, so I'm happy to do it. But I'm also, more than happy to let somebody else have a crack at it.
Okay. If you're
happy to have you do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see anyone. And then I think we have also done we have an alternate to SSD in case you can't make meetings. So do we have anyone who would like to be the alternate to the special school districts? And how many meetings do you go to?
There's only 4 a year. They
Okay.
only meet quarterly, and they're pretty speedy too.
Okay. Does anyone want to be the alternate if they can make it?
I'm more than happy to, or if Chris and I want to tag team so he can kind of see what it's like. I've done it before. I've been the SSD director before, so I'm more than happy to share that responsibility, but it's an easy thing to do the first year. I did it the first year I became on the board. So,
So Chris, would that be something you'd be interested in being just an alternate in case Melissa can't make it? And
That's fine.
you go to the meetings and then you just report back to us if there has been any information.
Okay.
And then you can also rely on Corey to help you out.
Perfect.
Okay. Great. So we are through with that part.
Lindsay, before we go on, there's one other role that we probably should add to this in the future that I'm serving on, which is the sales tax committee for Brentwood Bound that the city has.
Mm-hmm.
So far, we've had one meeting,
Okay.
and we were waiting for the election before we were going to have another one. But it's not really doing anything at this point. But just for future reference, I think that's probably another thing that this board has to decide upon. So if I'm gone, or maybe there may need to be an alternate, but this is the representative to just make sure that the city doesn't get out of line.
Okay. Well, so as we're talking about that, are you willing to serve as our representative for that committee for this year?
Yeah, I'll continue because they really haven't done anything yet, and they haven't even decided a chair yet. The potential chair just became a new alderman, so it's going to get reorganized.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mark. We can add that, certainly. And then do you feel like with that, since you've only had one meeting, but do you feel like you need an alternate to that in case you can't attend, or?
I don't know enough yet because we haven't even decided how many times we're going to meet.
Okay.
But right now I don't, and I will bring that up if I do.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, well, let's move into the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as outlined.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Hey, Brian, do we, just related to the financials, had Steve, I know there was still question around the budget movement that we talked about. Do we know where those monies are getting moved from, or no? Or are we still working through that?
I'll double check on that. I think he's completed that work. He just had to go through a multiple account codes, and he checked with me on a few of those. But we can get that information to the board prior to next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay. But that should be, I guess, that should be reflected. I can't tell, but it should be reflected then in these updated financials.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. All right, that passes 7-0. We're going to move into the superintendent report.
All right. First off, we have our COVID-19 updates. Work continues to progress in a few different areas related to COVID-19. One thing, we recently sent out a survey to all our parents, and then a separate survey to our staff to assess at this point in time how they are feeling in regards to comfort level of returning to school in the fall. And so we're still collecting that information. Once I have it, I'll report that out to the board as well. And then our plan is we're going to do a follow-up survey right after we come out with our detailed plan on July 15th. So at that point, then obviously people will be able to see the multiple different measures that we're putting into place, and we'll communicate those in a few different ways. And then we'll have that follow-up survey. And at that point, I think we'll have a very good sense of how many students that we'll have coming back, and where we're at with our staff. Another important piece, while we have been focusing appropriately on a lot of the logistics on bringing the students back and cleaning protocols and social distancing and many of those facets, we're also working on the academic pieces of this as well. So we are having a lot of conversations around, what are those essential standards that we need to focus on in case we do have to go out again. One key thing that's going to be a support is we're looking at different software tools that could help us, assuming we're going to need to some degree to do virtual learning again, even if that's just for students that aren't comfortable for coming to school, or if it is that we are out for any period of time. So I will be bringing the contract to the board in the future, but we are working, there's a product called Canvas that is utilized by many of K-12 districts and most, from what I can tell, of universities across the country. And basically what Canvas allows you to do, it's going to be a much more seamless experience for our parents, students, and teachers. It allows the students to be able to, for instance, go to one page, with templates on it, very easy to find the work from their teachers. Very helpful, for instance, not just at elementary, but your middle school and high school, where they have multiple courses. They don't have to go to 7 different locations. It pulls in everything from Google Meets. It coordinates with our grade book. It does a a really nice seamless job of allowing us to be able to, the teachers to record videos and also to do live streaming through it. So we're really excited about it. We actually did a webinar this week with the entire leadership team, and we're all very excited about that product. So Alex Triphammer, Dr. Triphammer's leading that up for us, and he's in the process of negotiating a contract with Canvas at this point. Any questions or thoughts on that before I go on to the next pieces?
Have you guys given any thought to doing like the NWEA test as soon as the kids come back or something like that to try to assess the learning loss? So you have.
Alex, why don't you chime in on that? Because Alex and I were just talking about that this morning, actually.
Yeah, so a couple things on NWEA. When the school closures first happened, they did not have a way to provide the test for students at home. Like everybody else, they've been pretty nimble, and in almost a worst case scenario, there is a way now to administer NWEA at home. If for some reason we can't come back to school. However, we're planning on coming back to school, and their guidance has been to administer that sooner than we normally would. If nothing else, that learning continuum will allow us to figure out what gaps exist. So, our recommendation will be to administer that not on day one, but sooner than we have in the past, so that we can hit that ground running.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I have another, just because these are the things I think about. Is there a plan to have the teachers kind of coordinate with the lower grade levels to figure out what essential understandings might have been left off so that they could pick those up?
I can address that too, Dr. Lane, if you want me to.
Please.
So on those work days that we had at the conclusion of the school year, we had team meetings that kind of just went down the line. For instance, kindergarten talked to first grade, and they talked about some of the learning targets that they should have covered during that fourth quarter. And, so there's going to be a certain amount of backfill on each of those grade levels. And so what we did was just have them go on down the line. So kindergarten talked to first talked to second, and so forth, just so that the receiving teachers have an idea of the standards that should have been hit, and they may need, like I said, they may need to do a certain amount of backfill on at the beginning of the school year.
It was actually very helpful for us because we did pick up, as you know, those 4 days that would have been snow days, and we were able to use those, and that was really the primary thing that we were working on is identifying those essential standards and where each student was and what that back to school is going to look like. So
yeah, that's awesome that you were able to do it now. It gives the teachers the whole summer to not necessarily plan, but at least to like ruminate on what that's going to be.
And then the last piece is, yes, we are continuing to, of course, work on all the logistics. We have multiple things that we've ordered, including hand washing stations, Purell stands throughout the buildings. I'm placing a furniture order this week for approximately about 65 single seat desks for the elementary schools between Mark Twain and McGrath. That will allow them to, the difficulty is that the best practice has been to move away from just, rows of desks and to move into more flexible seating. So we have a lot of tables and so forth. But for instance, yes, we will still be able to use those tables, but we'll have to have less kids at those tables. Some of those will have plexiglass dividers and so forth. So the end result is we walked every single room and determined by the number of students what additional furniture needs we would need. And so that order is being placed this week as well. Any questions or thoughts on COVID planning?
So Brian, outside of the guidance from the county health department, any big impediments or anything that you see really has got your attention in terms of potential roadblocks for getting back to school?
No, we're continuing to, and I have another Zoom call tomorrow morning with all the superintendents, but no, we're just continuing to, of course, track the numbers and, watch for, there's of course always concerns about resurgences with, there's a lot of people getting pretty relaxed out there and gathering in large gatherings and so forth. So there's, that's just me personally talking. There's just a little bit of a concern, but no, I'm still not seeing anything that would at this point keep us from moving forward with our plan to be back on August 24th.
And this notion of what I don't even know what's the term. Is it opting in or out? What is it? How are we characterizing that in terms of families or students that are not comfortable? What is that?
Well, yeah, truly, it's an opt out because it's not technically homeschooling because we want to offer more than that. We don't want it to be. If you're not comfortable coming back, that you just have to educate your own child with no assistance from the district. So it's kind of going to be a hybrid model where we do provide. Now, what that looks like is a lot of that is frankly going to depend on what kind of numbers are we talking, and that's why these surveys are going to be so vital in terms of, are we planning for, as small as we are, is it, a few sporadic children, or is it any kind of a real percentage that would require some more additional resources put around that. So,
and I guess that's where I'm going, right? Is you guys were thinking through that. The potential could be, if the numbers are large enough, we're going to have to look for resources, whether that be people or technologies or both, right? Okay.
Yeah. Canvas will significantly help in terms of the technology aspect. And that should be enough to, that would definitely be enough to support our people and supporting a limited amount of students. Like I said, if it's a significant portion, then we're going to go back to having some, discussions on some additional stipends or staffing needs to support that. But I don't necessarily predict that at this point.
But I guess that just for us, that's something to be thinking about, right? Because in fairness to the teachers, look, if the numbers are such, it's going to be hard, right? So I guess we should just be thinking about there is the potential that we need, whether it's stipends or, right, quite frankly, it could be more bodies, right? I guess, depending on numbers.
Yes, it could be. And you're exactly right, Jamie. We can't expect a teacher to do their regular job and be a virtual teacher to X amount of students in the afternoon or evening. So that's just not a feasible delivery model.
And I guess me personally, right, I'd like whatever we need to really look at putting the resources there, right? Because I do think it's critical we get kids back in the schools for a whole bunch of reasons. And so what I would not want to see is us trying to save some pennies as opposed to putting some resources there, not overburdening our teachers, just making sure we've got kids that are prepared and families that are prepared back in school.
Agreed.
Do you have a sense that your teacher numbers are going to come in sooner than your family numbers? About, we have, like you said, our staff is so small that losing 6 or 7 people because they're nervous about coming back is going to be a situation. Do you anticipate hearing from them sooner?
Yeah, I'll be talking to Sam as early as next week, and yeah, I think we'll be able to track those numbers down very quickly and have a sense of whether we feel that any staff members are not going to be able feel comfortable coming to work at this point.
I heard a rumor that some of the districts were hoping maybe as much as 20% of their kids were going to opt out. Do you think that that's accurate?
I think that's very high. and that's why the survey is why the survey is going to be important. But no, I feel that particularly when people hear all the measures that we're taking as a school district to keep kids and staff safe, personally, I feel it's going to be a small number in Brentwood. That's just what I feel. But we're going to be prepared either way. But no, I think that's very high, Melissa.
Okay. I mean, I think that the fact that we don't have buses makes us exponentially better positioned to manage this than basically everyone else. I was just curious as to where you thought we might come down. Too, they've been releasing studies where, I don't know, I saw one on a webinar the other day. They pulled parents in Denmark like 2 weeks before schools reopened, and like 40% of them said they weren't comfortable sending their kids back. And then a week later, like 1% of them had kept their kids home. So people talk a big game until there's an actual option to drop their kids off. And
we do have some bus kids, but is it minimal? So we'll still be able to run the routes that we have, or?
Yeah, Vic is working on a transportation plan. Transportation is, to Melissa's point, yeah, I feel bad for these districts that are transporting 20,000 kids. It's going to be tough, but they're doing things. Some districts are going to have to do staggered routes, but I believe Vic feels with their numbers, from what I'm reading so far, is they're just going to have some rules in place. 1 kid per seat. They're going to load from the front or to the back to the front. Assigned seating. A lot of cleaning protocols. So yeah, they're putting a lot of work in behind the scenes, and I'm not. I haven't seen all of it. I've just seen one document they put out as they were working in progress.
A quick question on, and I know this is stuff you'll probably go over in July, but I know we did contact some kindergarten parents, the administrators in the elementary school. And so a little bit of talk on Facebook has been about sack lunches and no backpacks. And are we also considering just providing food for everybody? And, is that something that we need to think about and look at what the price would be for the individual families to do that? Or again, is that just still part of up for discussion until July 15th?
We're still working with Chartwell's and food service, but yeah, there's been a lot of talk about, the reports that we're getting is that, a sack lunch would be fine. It's just, we have to look at the ways in which we're storing them. So we're not going to take the 20 sack lunches and toss them into the single container as you would have done in the past. So those are the kind of things you got to think about. But the actual sack lunch, from all accounts, doesn't seem to be an issue. It's how you store them, how you give them back out to the children. Yeah, those are all parts of the conversation.
So Brian, we talked too just about enrollment for the Early Childhood Center. Is that still staying stable, looking forward to our next school year?
Yeah, right now, and that's a conversation I recently had with Nancy, and she's going to get back to me on that, because we're currently sitting, I believe, in the mid to high 80s, which is typically where we're at this time of year, which would historically mean that, we would consider filling maybe another 15 slots or so over the course of the summer. But what I have Nancy looking at is whether we want to fill those slots or not, or except for maybe a couple in select classrooms, we may be shutting down enrollment in order, to help us with, distancing and protocols at the Early Childhood Center. these are things other early childhood centers are considering doing too, limiting enrollment. Some are eliminating, if they have the very young classrooms, the twos and below and so forth. So this all comes out of conversations with some of our peers. Anything else on COVID?
Nope.
All right. Proposition E update. I've got a couple updates and then I'm going to turn it over because we've got Jamie and Lindsay talking from their committee, and Mark's going to talk a little bit about the conversations he and I have had about the bonds. So first off, just some typical initial work that we kickstarted literally the day after Prop E passed. So we have proposals to have soil borings done at both Mark Twain and McGrath. We have proposals to have asbestos surveys done at Mark Twain and McGrath. We have had, we actually are going to have meetings with the architects and the building principals. I've got one of those scheduled for tomorrow, and then we'll have a follow-up for the other one the following week, just to start having that initial discussion about some space needs and start getting the input of the building principals. And then I think that segues nicely into talking about having a district Prop E design committee. Lindsay, would you speak to that a little bit, you and Jamie, if you would?
Yes, so Jamie and I have had a couple discussions about the design committee, and we're also part of the finance and facilities committee that we've started. So we met with Brian and Andrew Hartnett and Steve, our current CFO, to kind of just discuss what that design committee should look like, the size, who would be best represented on that. So we would like to have, obviously, and our architects will be part of that. We would want Andy to be part of that as someone coming from the district with our maintenance committee. Brian, we would like to have, and we charge Brian with finding the appropriate teachers and administrators that should be part of that design committee as well. And then we would like to have some community member representation there. And keeping in mind that we would like this committee to be a fairly small, tight-knit committee that can have some conversations and make some recommendations for us, but also in terms of the community, those community members to go out and talk to their neighbors and the people that live around them and bring back that perspective to the design committee and help us create and facilitate some of these community forums where we can get more feedback from the community. We felt like that was a great tool that was used this winter when we were talking about what to do with Prop E, and we'd like to have that again and make sure that our community, our parents, the people that live in our neighborhoods have ample time to give us feedback in this process. So that was the conversation we had, and we asked Brian and Sam to put together an application that could go out. And we're thinking at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, 3 community members, someone to represent just to kind of split it off to the schools, a Mark Twain community representative, McGrath, and the Early Childhood Center coming into that.
We also would have, obviously, we talked about 1 or 2 from the board would sit on that committee as well. Our thought process is you don't want to go more than 10, I'll call it. The key, though, being the individuals from the community, and then the other thing is charging them with, obviously Sam's at their disposal, a series of community forums. I thought, that November session we had is something that would really lend itself well to doing this, and that would be part of our charge of that committee. The other thing is being very clear when we put this application out that it's 3 people, right? That's what we're trying to do, and that we're expecting a lot of that group, right, to represent the community and then to put some time in it. We know it's going to be a fair amount of time, and again, that's our thought process, is making sure that we're clear articulating that as we ask for applicants.
So Brian did attach on our agenda, you can see there's the application that he and Sam put together for us. And I thought tonight we could discuss that. We can also talk about this design committee if there's feedback from the board on thoughts with this committee or the application. Ideally, we would like to get this posted soon, maybe have it open for 2 weeks. Our thought is the sooner we can get things pulled together and get started, the better off we're going to be if we wanted to start construction next summer. We need to get going on the design committee part.
So the one other, just real quickly, the one other thing we talked about is just we need to get a high level timeline together, right? Working backwards from what we actually think is feasible to deliver the 3 campuses being reconfigured and built out. So Brian was chatting with Ittner to come up with what they thought would be reasonable, achievable. So, you know, is it, and this is on them, but is it December of 2022, right? Is it whatever that might be? And then we work back from that with the timeline. And part of that, though, then quickly, we need to have this committee together really soon, right? So that we can start going through the process of laying the foundation for then doing community forums at some point. So one of the outstanding items we have right now is what do we think is really reasonable in terms of our delivery date? And what we mean by that is McGrath is up, Mark Twain is up, and the Hanley space is available for whatever we determine. And then the last piece is we do not, our point of view, again, open for discussion with the board here, is we're not tasking that design committee to decide what to do with the Hanley property, right? Their job is to figure out the designs for the elementary schools and making sure we can accommodate moving individuals, but ultimately it's with whoever the board is at that time to determine what to do with that property, if that makes sense.
So one question I have, obviously line of sight is very, very important. So thank you for that. Lindsay, Jamie, thank you for putting together a perspective of what the committee might be. Have we made a decision about the architect at this point? I mean, do we still need to do our due diligence and make sure that we cross all our T's on that topic as well? I mean, we did pick it for the high school, middle school. Well, one thing that is kind of intriguing to me is that I know that some architects are niche architects, right? So now we're talking about ECC all the way to 5th grade, and that's kind of a different kind of environment. And I don't know if it's we task the committee to do that, or if the board does that, or how do we do our due diligence on that this time and make sure that I feel that, and we all feel that we have the right person for the job.
Well, we talked about that a little bit, Mark, and you know, a couple things. One, just, and I'm not saying this is always just what other people do. Typically, school districts have a district architect, and you would basically, you know, every X amount of years, 5 to 10 years, you know, you should do your due diligence and go out for an RFQ, which, as you know, we just did that, you know, 2.5 years ago when I came to the district and moved away from the team that had historically worked with Brentwood. So I guess you know, a lot of that has to depend. Are you happy with, you know, are we happy with their performance? I can tell you in my mind, you know, I may have had issues with, and I'm not going to say it publicly, with, you know, other members of the team working on the current project. I've been happy with Ittner's work for the vast majority. And we also need to consider, yes, I can tell you, and they could bring in examples of this. Yes, they've done hundreds of elementary and early childhood centers and so forth. They got a vast amount of experience. So, and we also just need to consider as a board, that would set us back at least, I'd say 2 to 3 months minimum, because I already have Ittner doing a lot of work right now. They're the ones that are facilitating all these proposals, and they're kind of off to the races. So I'll just throw that out there, but obviously it's all at the board's pleasure.
So Brian, when we chatted about this, so one, that the concept of having a district architect, similar to the whole point with the bond side, I get. The other piece we talked about though is at some point, right, we need to have, Idner's got to present to us what, I mean, are we strictly time and materials, right? They've got to scope out for us what this looks like, right? And we need to formally engage with them on this. So Mark, my point of view is I'd expect, although they're doing some legwork now and we can say that's under the district agreement, I do expect, and we talked about this, Brian, is we need to have a proposal from them for what the statement of work would look like for this project. And at that point, that comes to the board. And I don't think that's design committee. I think that's us as a board looking at that and, you know, talking about accepting that, that contract.
And I should have been, thank you, Jamie, and I should have been clear on that. At this point, yeah, they're not under contract for this upcoming project. So that would be something that would ultimately have to come to agreement on, that would have to come to the board for approval. At this point, any work they're doing is basically in the hope and desire that they will, you know, get to complete it down the road.
Well,
So
Mark,
yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with looking at a proposal, make a decision on the proposal. I guess my question is whether or not we do like a formal RFQ where we open that up to more than one architecture firm, so that at least the board has something to look at and make a decision upon. I mean, I don't know what that looks like, but I mean, the way that I think this through is we shouldn't just give someone the inside track and say, hey, you definitely got it. So I'm glad you've got a good, strong working relationship there, and that's fine. But should we look and see and see if we actually do have like two people provide the proposal, or is that not even possible, you're saying, because they've already done so much legwork?
Well, they wouldn't present, no, you're not going to get these other architects to present a detailed proposal. They will, what you do if you get an RFQ, it's going to be very similar to what we saw before. They'll come, you know, these other companies, and it would be the same. They would come in with just some very preliminary type drawings of what, you know, the elementaries could look like, but it's not going to be detailed. They're not going to put, you know, hundreds of hours of, or anything close to that in legwork. And they're really just going to come in, do a 30-45-minute presentation about their merits, the history of their company, other projects they've worked on. And that's what you're going to be making. So if you're making a decision to switch architects, that's an RFQ. It's not an RFP. You can't do an RFP on this kind of work. So it's a request for qualification. So it's really just about their qualifications as a company.
So walk me through this. Inter comes in and says they want 10% off the top. How do we know that that's a good contract versus another firm? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, there's industry, and you know, it can move a little bit, but there's industry standards on those percentages. And you know, last time around, I was talking to several of my superintendent contacts to see what they've paid their various architects. And if you recall, I took a pretty hardline stance on that percentage and got that down. So I would do that kind of, and ultimately, yeah, if push comes to shove, and if you can't come to an agreement, then absolutely, we could, of course, bring in another company. But you know, I think you know that they would want the work. So,
I mean, I guess, so Brian, the point, and Mark and I had chatted about this, here's what we're trying to protect against. In the absence of anyone else putting out a number, right, all we're doing is, hey, what's Itner's incentive, right, unless someone else has a number out there. Now, it is a big project, right, and it is something that I assume they want. With Mark and I, because I align with Mark, is how do we protect against Itner just saying flat out it's 10%, right, and or it's you, Brian, saying I want you down to 9.5 or whatever that is. That's all I want, is for us to be able to, hey, Itner, Brian, I trust you. You're working with him. You seem to have a good working relationship. That's why we have you, right? I don't have anything. I have shared some feedback that I have, but my whole point is I want to be protecting against, we've got a lot of money we're taking out on behalf of the taxpayers, right? I want us doing everything we can to protect that investment and to be putting it where we really, really need it. And so a percentage point could be a really big deal. How do we make sure we're squeezing that out? If that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And that's where basically I'll, go to the mat in terms of going back and forth. And like I said, a lot of it is you're going to be looking at what are their competitors charging. There's many other projects going on with K-12 buildings right now, and I can speak to their superintendents as I did last time, get what that percentage was, and then work, as much as I can down from those, which I was able to do last time with the Ittner. But just understand, another company, like let's say we were hypothetically to go, I won't put a name out there, but one of the competitors, if they win the so-called win the RFQ, they become our choice to become our new district architects. At that point, they're not going to come in with a percentage on this new project. That's going to be part of what they're going to come in, do a bunch of work, develop that, and then they're going to come back. So we're going to be ultimately, I know what you're saying. I'm all about competition, but they're going to come back and we'll be down the road with company B at that point, and they could say the same thing. And then, we'd have to kind of go back to the starting with another company. But their ultimate incentive is this is a very nice, centrally located $29 million project, which is going to be worth a lot of money. So I feel confident that, believe me, and the board's going to have ultimate approval of this. You're going to see that we're going to get a very competitive deal out of this, but I do understand what everyone's saying.
And I think, Mark, where I get comfortable is I'm leaning on Brian when Ittner comes in with their proposal. Brian, you said it. I'd like to see comps, right, for similar projects and what the terms are, because then at that point, at least I have some data points where we then can push back. Because in the absence of that, I have no idea, right? And quite honestly, I don't have the expertise to determine that. But that, Mark, is how I got comfortable with that, because that RFQ piece was just a nuance that I hadn't really fully thought through, and it does make sense because we would have, and not that we couldn't. Brian, though, has communicated that he likes that relationship. He thinks they do good work, right? That's why we have Brian here, and that's how I personally get comfortable with this. Now, Brian, I do, as we present that proposal, having those other data points, I think will be really good.
Well, and then, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. And yes, I trust Brian and his relationship with Ittner. What I'm saying is I think Brian might also need a little leverage with Ittner, and I think hopefully this conversation helps with that. I think what I want to make sure that we clearly articulate is at any given moment, until we sign that contract, we understand that there's a risk of waiting 2 months, but, interest rates are really, really cheap. And so that gives us a little bit more time to make the right and proper decision. And this is a 50-year decision. Like, I want to make sure that's very, very clear. So understand that if we see something that is a concern, we're ready to go the other direction. That said, if Ittner is the right choice, then Ittner's the right choice. That's all I want to make sure is clear.
Points well taken. All right, now let's talk a little bit of.
One more thing on the application process. Just a thought is having Nancy maybe even give us a couple of younger families that are probably just getting into the early childhood center, that we could make sure reach out to them and see if they'd want to be on that committee before she retires. Just because I think that's a big piece, and we've got a family that's going to be in the early childhood for a while. That would be a benefit to whatever candidate we choose, but at least being able to talk to someone and reaching out to some of those people so we have a couple candidates to look at.
So Brian, with this application that you put together, is there going to be some explanation of how many people we're looking for, and maybe what that commitment is going to be for them? It's a 1-year commitment to monthly meetings or something to kind of. I think it's important to lay out what we are asking for and be very upfront about how many people we're looking for, and that we'll have some additional opportunities for community members and parents to give feedback.
Yes, exactly. It's gonna come with an explanation that will cover the charge of the committee, the fact that we are, it's going to be a small group and why that is, but then also talk about the community forums that we are going to hold. And by the way, as part of IDNR is currently working on that high level schedule that Jamie spoke to earlier, and they are working community forums into that schedule as well. So yeah, we'll have I'll have Sam work on a little preface to the application that will explain all of those pieces and the commitment that people are looking at, so that they understand what they're signing up for, basically.
Great. And then will that go out on Parent Square and our website? And are there other ways that we're going to try and get this out to the community?
I don't know, Sam, are you listening in on that?
Have a lot of group of candidates applications. So
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
So then the last piece that I had on a property update is I'll start off the conversation, and then Mark can add on to it as well because he's been involved. So we've been Steve Chodas and I have been talking to Stiefel in terms of their recommendations on when we should do our bond sale. As you recall, in the past, the last time for Prop B, we did it in 2 separate tranches and split that up because at the time, that was their recommendation, and economically made sense to try to time the selling of those bonds to when we would need to utilize the money. The bond market and the climate is very different now. And so for a few reasons, Stiefel's recommendation is that we would do the bond sale in August, and that we would do it in a single tranche for the 29 million offer order. And a few reasons for that. There's, the bond market is currently at a historically low averages, according to Lorenzo Boyd from Stiefel. In his 25 years, this is the lowest rates he has experienced. We couldn't lock them in until August, obviously, but right now they're sitting at about, today was 2.55, and that's a total APR cost on those, which is, like I said, historically low. Then you combine that with the fact that, we don't know what the future of COVID is going to be. You got the November elections. You got the fact that when COVID hit, the bond market was, by all intents and purposes, shut down for 6 to 8 weeks, and no bonds were being sold. So you just have a lot of factors in there. So the concern would be if we did do a second tranche in, say, a year and a half, it might be, there's a definite possibility that those rates are going to go up, could be 100 basis points, at which point you're paying that extra cost for 20 years. for say that, 14.5 million or whatever you take out in that second tranche. The only negative to take it out all at once is you're basically going to be sitting on money for roughly, a year and a half before you're needing to spend the majority of it. And while we will reinvest that money, you're not going to get 2.55% back in the kind of safe investments that we are required to do as a school district. So ultimately, yes, you're losing a little money there, but you're potentially and quite likely making up for it in 20 years later. So that's just kind of a brief overview. Mark, anything that you want to add on to that? You have a lot of expertise in this area.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in school district bond markets, and I think we have to rely on the consultants here. I did ask a lot of questions. I put together a couple theories too that I thought might be able to work, and it turns out they would not work. And ultimately, I think this is probably the best thing that we could do. There is a situation where in the future, that W curve might hit, right? So, they've talked about the V curve, they've talked about the U curve for the market. The people that I've talked to that are managing money right now are really concerned about the W curve. And to Brian's point, there could be a situation where, November elections come along and that's when the actual next crash happens. And the biggest concern with the bond market that I see is less higher interest rates in the future. It's more being able to actually sell the bond, right? So like Brian said, there were like 6 to 8 weeks where they weren't even selling anything, and we're a small market. And so cash in hand, I think, is actually worth more than two in the bush at this point. And we really need to take that money in hand as soon as possible. Mostly, again, I want to stress what I'd be more concerned about is the stability of the bond market in the next 6 to 8 months, depending on what happens with COVID.
I mean, I agree. I think the big thing for us as a board is we just need to be able to speak to, once we take that debt out, that gets passed on to the taxpayer. And so what that means is if we took it in tranches, the tax hit is staggered based on how much we take out, right? So I absolutely think this is the right answer. But what that means is they're going to get hit we are all going to get hit for that full amount come August to service the debt. We just need to be able to speak to it. These are the reasons why we did that, right? And so one of the goods out of this is, hey, at least you're going to know what your impact is, right? It's right up front, and that's it. But we just need to be able to speak to it because reality is the bulk of the money won't be spent for a year and a half, right, before we break ground. So I just, when we get to that point where we vote on this, we just all need to be mindful of that because that's what this means ultimately.
And it also means that, we do want to try and move faster with that design phase. And getting that committee together and understanding what it looks like, we need to do that as soon as possible because, to Jamie's point, we need to show value to the taxpayer sooner rather than later.
I agree, and I do think that communication piece is going to be key moving into this next project for why we're doing each step that we're doing and being clear with the community.
So
Brian, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We were going to have this in the timeline. We spoke to this as well, just so that we as a board have it. Part of our timeline is also exactly that says in August, we go to the bond markets with that offering and we do the full amount so that everyone, we can see that, we understand that, and we're just over communicating it, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's fine. And we'll have Stiefel come to our August business meeting. But obviously, if anyone has any questions prior to that, please send them my way, and I'll make sure that Stiefel and Lorenzo get those answers back to us. So that
sorry.
Go ahead, Melissa.
My question is very basic because I understand virtually nothing about this process. So last time we sold the bonds, we ended up with like extra money. Is that something that's going to happen because of the way the bond market has shifted? Is that likely to happen again, or is it going to be the opposite?
Yes, but we don't call it extra money.
It's fun money.
It's money.
Well,
No.
That's how
Yes,
it works in my house, at least.
it does.
yeah, I want some of that extra money. Yes, it will. It's called a premium, and it won't be until they price and sell the bonds. Now they'll have an estimate going in, but yes, there'll be a sizable premium. It's probably going to be in the 1.5 to $2 million range, is what I would estimate at this point.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that that's an important part of the messaging too. Then,
Yeah.
is if going now means that we're able to get some extra resources for the project, and it also makes it a lot easier to budget out the project if we know exactly how much money we're going to have. $2 million is a lot of money, no matter what.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about.
It does give us some flexibility in the planning. Obviously, that the board would have ultimate control over, but if additional monies were decided to be spent, that gives us that flexibility.
Yeah, and even Melissa, we talked about, if you go look at it, it's with debt being cheap, really the value is over the 20 years that we take the debt out, it's cheaper for us as a taxpayer way down the road, right? And that's something we talked about, just communicating that as well. A couple percentage points makes a big difference over 20 years, and if we're able to go do that 29 at this rate now, it's a sizable chunk of change that the taxpayers benefit from.
Absolutely. Okay, I just wanted, that was the premium was the part that I wasn't sure about how the fluctuations were going to impact that, because I know I only understand enough to be dangerous is basically where we're at. So thank you for clarifying.
All right, thank you. So those were my Proppy updates. So if we don't have anything further on that, we have Dr. Triphammer doing our supplemental programs report.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Did you guys receive a copy of this?
We did.
Okay, so I don't need to put it on the screen or anything. Okay, so I have 3 programs I wanted to just quickly go over this evening. I want to talk about ELL, our LEAP program, and the collaborative school. These are the annual reports that we give on each of these programs each year, and I can kind of give you a little bit of update on all 3 of them. So we'll start with ELL. What we had were 30 students receiving services this year. We had 8 on monitor. So technically, they're still under the ELL umbrella. They still have to take the access exam in the spring, or actually the winter, but they don't receive direct instruction because they've reached that level, which, it's not akin to graduating, but it's pretty darn close. So once a student is on monitor status for 2 years, they actually can be exited from the program. So that's been a good thing. Our numbers did decrease from the previous year, and a lot of that has to do with we have a population of students that are moving into the district for about a year at a time, and then they're moving out. So they are from out of the country, and the program their parents are involved with are associated with either SLU or WashU, and so their parents are doing a 1-year program. And so we're getting a little bit of turnover with our ELL population mainly because of that. And for whatever reason, we had less students this current school year. So that's kind of the number side of it. So overall, we have 38 students that are receiving, or that are on our ELL roles. And just as a frame of reference, DESE's recommendations would be that anytime you have 20 students, that would be the equivalent of a full-time teacher. We've been able to serve our students, I think, very well with our 2 part-time ELL teachers. Mrs. Wassman works at Brentwood Middle School, Brentwood High School, and McGrath. So she's a little bit more than half of the overall caseload. And then Mrs. Lazinski works at Mark Twain only. And for whatever reason, Mark Twain has a pretty sizable number of ELL students. So that's kind of the status in terms of numbers of students in the program. Like I mentioned, it's been it's a kind of a strange target to kind of hit. We lost several students, but then we also gained 6 new students this year. And again, that's by virtue of students who have moved into our district and some students who have moved out. Let's see. I mentioned that each year the students take the access score or access test. That's an ELL exam that all ELL students are required to take. And we use that data to determine whether or not a student can exit from the program. And happy to report that 4 of our students were able to exit the program. And I say that in quotes because, again, they're not entirely dismissed from the program. They move into that monitor status. So the ELL teachers will continue to check in on those students. They'll check in with the teachers to make sure that the kids are kind of where they need to be. And honestly, if there's any kind of backpedaling, they can come in and start providing those services because they are still designated as an ELL student. Let's see. I think that's pretty much the highlights for our English language learner program. I don't know if you had any questions on our ELL program.
I have a question. What did you say? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. That DESE recommends 1 teacher for every 20 students?
Yes, but I can tell you, in my experience, that's a pretty high standard. Most schools that I'm familiar with, our ELL teachers serve sometimes double and sometimes even triple that amount of students. It's a recommendation by DESE more than it is a hard and fast rule.
Okay, because it looks like we have 30 with 0.8. So I don't know if that's something that we need to be looking at, picking up an extra half-time person, or if that's a concern.
I checked in at the end of the year, I did check in as much as I could virtually with both teachers. And honestly, I feel like they were giving me pretty good feedback that they were able to meet the needs of our kiddos. And part of it is because we're so small that oftentimes ELL kids are bunched together in a grade level. So they're able to service 2 or 3 students at a time. So it makes for a fairly efficient delivery model. So it's where the numbers sometimes don't always flesh out is the case. Now, if they came back and were giving me input that they couldn't meet the kids' needs and they could barely meet their minutes, then I'd be a little more concerned. But the feedback I got from them is that they felt pretty comfortable with the amount of services they were able to provide.
Okay, and it's not like an IEP where there's like state mandated minutes for service.
No, it's pretty wide open. It's based on student need, and we use those access scores. They give you 4 areas of language, I think, and they're able to drill down to specific needs that the kids require, and they're able to kind of structure their program based on exactly what they need, based off of their test data.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Alex, do we have an idea of how many ELL students we'll have next year? Do we know, like, coming from the early childhood center, moving into our elementary schools, or any idea what that is?
Well, I think, no. I think we can assume that we're going to begin with our 38. And then if we have new students come in from early childhood, we have our ELL teachers spend the first month of school screening any students that when students enroll either in kindergarten or if they're a new student, if they have language other than English, they fill out a language survey, and any survey that comes back as a second language, those students are screened by our teachers. So that doesn't always mean they qualify for services. They give them not the full-blown access test, but they give them a screening measure, and based on those results, that'll determine whether or not they are eligible for ELL services. So we won't know hard numbers probably until late September, early October.
Okay.
So you're not expecting any of the 38 to be leaving then? The number's not going to go down.
I don't anticipate it going any further down unless we have some students. Sometimes we don't know about students who move over the summer. We won't know that until school starts and they're not there. But at this point, we're anticipating the 38 students that we served at the end of the year to be back with us. Okay. Well, then I will move on to our next program, our LEAP program. That's Learning Enrichment and Acceleration Program. That is taught by Kyle Henderson. And the one thing that was really interesting to note, if you look at the total students served, the projection for next year significantly drops. I mean, we've kind of been hovering in that low 50s range historically in our LEAP program. Next year, we're projected to start the year with 37, and I can give a little bit of an explanation for that. We have a large number of students in 5th grade who are in our LEAP program, and so they are graduating onto 6th grade, and so what we don't have is our students that are in kindergarten. We don't know who is going to qualify as 1st graders for our LEAP program, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Typically, Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Page screen a couple of our grade levels in the springtime. Well, obviously, with COVID, that screening did not happen, and so believe it or not, what we're looking at is trying to figure out when to provide that screening for 3 grade levels. It'll be next year's 1st graders, 2nd graders, and 3rd graders, because we've missed now a pocket. It's kind of hard to explain, but we've missed a pocket of the cohort because we weren't able to test in the spring. You know, I don't know that it doesn't make sense to me to wait until next spring to do our regular screening. I think we do have to play catch up to a certain extent in the fall. Now, having said that, I also want to be kind of respectful of teachers who are having kids come in off of a kind of a strange, 2-month period of not being in school. And I think there has to be a certain amount of acclimation where teachers just have to kind of get their class kind of in order before we start kind of altering their schedule and doing whole grade screening. It takes some time to do that. So I just want to be sensitive to the classroom teachers that we're not, here we are being gone for 3 months, and then all of a sudden the lead teacher's coming in to do her screening and all of that. I feel like we'd be best served and we get better results, quite frankly, if we got things kind of settled down. And I would anticipate by late September, early October, we can get that screening in and we can start identifying new students. So that was a long explanation to say I'm hopeful that in the fall we'll be able to increase the number of our LEAP students. But quite frankly, it comes down to we weren't able to screen, and we graduated a big chunk of kids in 5th grade.
On the LEAP, really quick, Alex, are you only tested in like kindergarten, 1st grade? Or if there are parents or students in other grades, do teachers ever come back and say, hey, this child's interested, or I think we've missed someone, and do we test other grades, or is it one and done in kindergarten and 1st?
So here's how that works. That's a great question. So we screen kindergarten. We don't, when I say that we screen kindergarten, Mrs. Henderson goes in and does creativity lessons with them 6 times a year and starts collecting data. And then in 1st grade, they take what's called the NNAT, which is a standardized assessment. And so we do that in 1st grade and 3rd grade, except we won't have our 2nd graders miss that opportunity. And so that's why I'm saying we have to do 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in the fall, which will be quite a bit of testing. But, I think we have to cast that net pretty wide because a lot of those kids haven't had an opportunity to show what they know. Now, the other piece of that is any students that are new to our district that were in a previous accelerated program, they can have access to our program provided that they meet our criteria. If a parent or a teacher recommends a student anywhere in the 1st through 5th grade, we would look at them as well. So yeah, based on teacher and parent recommendation, we would also screen additional students.
Thank you.
let's see. So we talked about I just don't think we can wait until next spring to look at our kiddos, but I do want to give them some time to kind of get settled back in once school starts, and then we'll resume our screening. A couple neat things that happened this year, just kind of highlights real quickly. The district was kind of honored to welcome DESE's Director of Gifted Education, Christine Noby, who oddly enough was a former teacher in Brentwood. So she's now the Director of Gifted Education at DESE, and she came into St. Louis in the fall and spent a few hours touring McGrath and spent time with Mrs. Henderson and myself. So we thought that was kind of a neat little shout out to have DESE come on site and visit our program. Other neat things that happened this year, Mrs. Henderson was able to restore field trips for her LEAP kids. That's something that's been on hold for quite a while. She was able to utilize the Litzinger Ecology Center, so that was a neat extension. A lot of our kids have spent time over at Litzinger, but she's able to kind of take it to another level. And one of those levels are then introducing computer modules that go along with their field trip experience at Litzinger. So that was a kind of a neat little advantage that she was able to provide for her students this year. She worked with Sam this year on using Parent Square for improving her communication. That was one of her goals from the previous year. And the only other thing that was really kind of neat is because our 5th grade, like I mentioned, was really big, she had to divide the students into 2 groups. And she chose to do a gender-based classroom and give, quite frankly, some of our girls a chance to really have a voice in where they want to go and make it more of a personalized experience. So when the class was really big, it was kind of like herding cats. Kids were just kind of going everywhere. And unfortunately, when the groups are that big, sometimes their kids' voices aren't heard. And the feedback that Mrs. Henderson got back from students and parents this year was that by dividing them into smaller groups, she was really able to hone in on, and the boys too, but specifically for the girls, really what were their interests, and she was able to tailor a program that really met their needs. So that was kind of a neat opportunity that we had because our 5th grade was so big. Looking at program goals for next year, Mrs. Henderson has spent the last 2 years revamping the LEAP curriculum, and that should be completed next year. And then really the other big goal is to figure out, like I've mentioned 100 times already, how are we going to screen these kids coming back to find out, who would be eligible for our LEAP program. All right, any other questions on LEAP?
Real quick question. Did we do anything virtual for the LEAP kids during the closure?
Yes, Mrs. Henderson was able to tap into teachers' Google Classrooms and insert activities specific for her LEAP students.
Thanks.
You bet. And just as a point, I met with Kyle probably every other week during the whole entire closure, trying to get updates on what she was doing with her kiddos. Okay, well then the last piece I have is to talk a little bit about the collaborative school. As you know, that is our alternative high school, if you will. It serves not only Brentwood, but students from Ladue and Clayton. I will say out of the 3 districts, we represent the smallest piece of that pie. To that end, only 5 students from Brentwood attended last year, which is a little lower, but it's in our historical average. I mean, to be, since we are so small as a school district, it would make sense that we have the fewest number of students. So relative to Ladue and Clayton, our student participation at Collab is kind of consistent with our overall enrollment. So it is a low enrollment. The good news on our students, we had 2 students that were, let's see, I'm kind of skipping ahead of myself. Let me come back to that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the curriculum. Collab changed from to a new online curriculum called Ingenuity. We're using Odysseyware for a number of years, but my understanding is that Ingenuity bought out Odyssey Ware, and that's the curriculum that the students are going through. You know, and really what Collab does is offer kids who don't fit in a traditional 4-year high school program. It's an alternative to that, so that we don't have kids dropping out or just leaving the school system altogether. So, you know, what Mrs. Francis, the director over there, really pushes is, again, that personal approach, whether it's Missouri Options to get students high set, high school equivalency exam, to get them the credits that they need to graduate. I mean, it's really an individual approach for each of our students. She did give me some information that I thought was worth sharing with everybody. So the Collab School's been in existence for 10 years, and in that 10 years, it has serviced 543 students, and only 5 were non-graduating, which means over the last 10 years, the school's had a 99% success rate of graduating kids. So, you know, its mission is to really provide that niche for students, like I said, who may not fit in that traditional mold, and it's been a good solution. Now, having said all of that, it's, you know, for us here in Brentwood, it doesn't serve a lot of our students, but it does meet some of our students' needs. The only other piece I wanted to add that I thought was worth noting is that, you know, students that are attending Collab often need additional supports. And one of the things that we've been able to do is ask Mrs. Bone, our district social worker, to kind of make the rounds through Collab. Those are, you know, even though we have small numbers, she makes a stop in there once a week, checks in on those kids, meets with them, and sees, you know, what she can do to support them and try to get them through school. We sat in a few meetings with Ms. Bowen at Collab this year, and she really was instrumental in moving the ball down the field for one of our kids who ultimately ended up taking the high set and is going to get a diploma. So that was a good success story there. So that's what I have on Collab.
All right. Any final questions for Alex?
Nope. Thank you, Alex.
You bet.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. See you guys.
All right. And Lindsay, that is the superintendent's report.
Is there a special school district liaison report?
There is not.
Okay. And MSBA delegate report. We have a conference coming up at the end of the week.
Yeah, I was unmuting myself there. Yeah, I'm planning to attend that. I think somebody else. Jamie, were you attending that as well?
I think Jamie and I are signed up.
Okay. And that's about all that's going on. There will be the delegate assembly will be electing the officers, and I understand this year we have a contested election. So sometime between now and Friday, I'll look at what I can about these people and try to decide who I think I ought to vote for. If anybody knows any of them, feel free to tell me what I ought to do, but I suspect I don't.
I'll definitely do that, Keith.
I can turn the camera off when I flip my coin, I guess, right?
Keith, I'm just
That's
worried
all.
that you know how to go vote virtually. I'm worried about this. Maybe we should have a training session.
You know, I'm more astute than you might think sometimes, Jamie.
All right. Okay. So yeah, Friday, the 3 of us will be part of that virtual conference, which looks like there's some good information and only a couple different sessions. So I think we should have it covered if there are 3 of us on there. And then I know Kate had sent out an email, or maybe at our last meeting, if folks are interested in attending the conference that's scheduled currently to be in Kansas City, September 24th to the 27th for the annual conference. Just let Kate know. Is there anything else that you need from us, Kate?
No, not this evening.
Okay. We do have, so we'll have a meeting next week, and then we have our meeting scheduled in July. If we need to meet, we can continue to do that virtually. I had also sent out an email to the board. We would like to have a board retreat. We're looking at August. I've heard back from a couple folks with some flexibility and some preference towards a weekend date. So if you can just take a look at that and let me know, we can hopefully get something on the calendar and be able to get together in August as well.
Lindsay, I still haven't gotten back to you because I have no idea what my family is doing in August. We had a Hawaiian vacation scheduled that has now been canceled. So I don't know, but I'll let you know.
This is a really great, like, second best to Hawaii. So you're gonna have a great time.
I'm expecting a Hawaiian theme.
Maybe Keith can do a pig.
Yeah.
Do a pig roast.
I mean, if
Sounds
Keith, that is a good idea.
I know we've talked about doing
Sounds
that
great.
to celebrate Prop E, but we're gonna have to wait until we can all get together. So stay tuned. At some point, we'll have some good get-togethers.
Lindsay, I'm in the same boat as Mark about the days. We're still trying to figure out if and when we're going to do something. If we finalize something, I'll let you know right away.
That sounds great. Just for your information too, we are going to be gone the first week of August. So if we do have, for me, if we do have a school board meeting that week, if we can think about continuing to do this virtually, that would be the one time I'd really like to do that.
And then I have one question. Have we looked at renting bubbles so that we can all, be in the exact same room? Did you guys see that concert? Oh man, who was the band? I think it was the Flaming Lips. They did an entire concert with, it was essentially like a mosh pit, right? All the fans were in bubbles too. So you had to get into a bubble before you could go in, and they were playing inside bubbles too. Anyway, we should look at that. Brian, you might want to think about that for kids, especially for the ECC, right? Because none of those ECC kids are going to be able to have masks. Just think of a 2-year-old in a little bubble floating around and, anyway.
We haven't, but thank you. You've given us some time to think about that.
I think you've been watching way too
not to be finding around in things.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one alone, Keith. You're right. Just let that go.
I think you've been watching way too much something, Mark. YouTube or TV or.
I am going to send you guys all the link, and you'll watch it yourself.
All right.
Get right on that.
Great. So that ends our open session. So if I can get a motion to move into closed sessions for the reasons on our agenda.
I move that we adjourn and move into closed session for the reasons outlined in the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, Kate?
Jamie Allen,
Yes.
Melissa Neert,
Yes.
Chris Perkins,
Yes.
Keith Ravenberg,
Yes.
Lindsay Spencer,
Yes.
Terry Trostel,
Yes.
Mark Wilmer.
Yes.
Hey, Chris, it took me like 13 meetings to get that, whether I say yay or yes. And since I'm Alan, I go first. I'm like, I don't know what do I say?
Thank you, Kate.
What do you need?
Hello? So nice job, Perkins. Nice job.
Thanks, brother.